Did you know that Queen Victoria loved a costume ball? She and her family loved dressing up, and so they regularly had private parties and also larger costume balls to celebrate this. So in this amazing double portrait, we see Queen Victoria and Prince Albert in fancy dress. They're dressed up as Edward III and his wife, Queen Philippa. The royal couple wore these costumes to a ball held at Buckingham Palace on the 12th of May 1842, and it was attended by 2,000 people. Dressing up allowed Victoria and the royal family to escape their identities, and I think this must have been needed every now and again because the pressures of being a queen were quite intense. So this is a depiction of that ball, and we can see Victoria there and her courtiers around her. The second costume ball that Victoria hosted was in 1845, and this time the theme was early Georgian costume, and this is a depiction of it. And this was Queen Victoria's costume. It was made by the royal dressmaker, and Victoria loved it so much that she commissioned a number of portraits with her in it. Here is another portrait of Victoria in this costume, and you can see that she really loved it, so she wanted it to be commemorated forever. And here is Prince Albert in his 18th century costume. And the third costume ball that Victoria held was in 1851. The theme for this one was the Restoration Court of Charles II, so in the 17th century. And this was a design for Queen Victoria's dress. And remarkably, her dress has survived to this day, and it remains in the royal collection. Victoria was absolutely delighted with her dress, and she wrote about it in her journal, saying, "Our dresses were really beautiful and so correct." Here, Victoria actually sketched the costumes that she wore and Albert wore. And here is an amazing depiction of that ball, and we can see all the ladies and all the gentlemen being led in for a dance. It must have been very spectacular indeed. But as well as these large state occasions that Victoria was hosting, she also hosted a lot of smaller parties in which her children could be involved. So in this amazing double portrait, we see Princess Victoria, the Princess Royal, aged 9, and there on the left we see her 7-year-old sister, Princess Alice. They're both dressed up in Georgian costume from the 18th century, so sort of echoing that 1845 ball. So they're dressed like this because they performed a minuet, which is a formal dance from the 18th century, and they performed this in front of her mother, the Queen, for her birthday in 1850. And here we see the princesses Helena and Louise in their 18th century fancy dress that they'd worn to a ball in 1865. And here's a close-up of Helena holding her fan, complete with an amazing powdered wig. In this photograph, we can see the young Princes Leopold and Arthur in fancy dress costume. And they are wearing medieval-style clothing because little Leopold was turning 6 and a costume ball was thrown at Buckingham Palace in his honour. And here we see that children's costume ball filled with children in their fancy dress costumes. This was held in the supper room at Buckingham Palace, and it was for children aged between 6 and 14 years old. And of course, Leopold's brothers and sisters also attended, and here we have Princess Helena and Louise. They are wearing Swiss costumes. So there you go. I think that this children's ball must have been pretty spectacular, as were the other adult balls. I would have absolutely loved to have attended.